and welcome to Live Interactive English. I'm Matt.
And I'm Kiki.
And today we're talking about a story called The Duplicity of Hargraves. So we're talking about duplicity. So duplicity is a word that means to deliberately deceive someone or to tell someone something that is untrue in order to get them to maybe act in a certain way or do something in a way that they would like that person to do.
That's right. And usually the word duplicity has a more negative tone to it. So it's usually when somebody's trying to trick someone into doing something so that the person that is tricking the other person can get something out of it. But Matt, do you think it's possible that sometimes duplicity could have a positive outcome?
Yeah, you know what? I can think of one time in my life that maybe it has had a positive outcome. So one time often when I was young, my dad would go away on business trips. So we'd go to different places and he'd be away for a while and me and my sister would be sad because our dad was away. So when he'd come back, he'd bring us gifts, or so we thought. So one day, while my dad was away, I was helping my mom to unload things from her car. While I was doing that, I saw some toys in a bag. I thought they might be gifts for maybe my next birthday or Christmas, so I didn't say anything to my mom. Now, when my dad came home from that trip, he gave us those toys that my mom had bought. Or I assume my mom had bought because they had been in her shopping bags in her car.
And you saw it in her car. So you thought that all along you'd been getting gifts from your dad, but because he's away on business, he might be busy all the time. So even though he's probably thinking about you while he's away, but your mom just wanted to make sure that you kids know that he's still thinking about you. So she prepped these gifts for him.
Right, so it was something, she was trying to do something nice by being duplicitous or showing duplicity. Okay, so I guess we're gonna see a bit more about, how this character Hargraves is duplicitous when we get into our story after this.
Major Pendleton Talbot and his unmarried daughter, Miss Lydia Talbot, lived in a boarding house together. He spent most of his days thinking about the past while writing a book about his life. The Talbots were originally from Alabama. Though they had once been a wealthy family, the Major and Miss Lydia were now living in Washington, D.C., with little money left. Major Talbot often spoke about the Southern society he had grown up in. He missed its customs and fashions and the system of slavery which the Civil War had ended.
Today we are looking at part 1 of the story, The Duplicity of Hargraves.
Now, as we get into this, it's important to keep in mind that this is a very old story. It was written in 1902 and takes place around 1875 or so. And so some of the things in this story, some of the themes or some of the things that are done in this story are not acceptable by today's standards. So let's get into the story. Major Pendleton Talbot and his unmarried daughter, Miss Lydia Talbot, lived in a boarding house together. He spent most of his days thinking about the past while writing a book about his life. So they lived in a boarding house. Now, a boarding house is a place where you live together with many other people inside of one house. And it's usually a fairly cheap place to live. So it's somewhere you might live if you don't have a lot of money. And because it's maybe not that comfortable to have to live with so many other people.
That's right. And so we know that the Talbots were living in a boarding house. And back to the story, the Talbots were originally from Alabama. Though they had once been a wealthy family, the Major and Miss Lydia were now living in Washington, D.C. with little money left. So we know that the Talbots, they used to be rich and they used to live in Alabama. They were originally from Alabama. But now, I guess after the war was over, they were left living in Washington, D.C., and they didn't have a lot of money.
Right, so Alabama is one of the southern states in the United States. So it's near the south, near the bottom if you look at a map. So near the Mexican border, sort of that area of America. So they're originally from Alabama.
Yeah, just like you're originally from Canada and I'm originally from Singapore. So the word originally, it's an adverb and it's basically the origin of something or where something came from. And sometimes when we talk about something's origin, it's almost like the beginnings, the story of when something first existed. So an example sentence would be, I am originally from New York City, but I have lived in Taichung for 5 years now.
Okay. So we found out that the Talbots were once wealthy. Now, wealthy means to have a lot of money or things of value. It's a little bit different from the word rich. Because if someone maybe wins a lot of money in the lottery, they will be rich. But if they can just quickly spend that money and have no money again, then they'll be poor again. Someone who is wealthy maybe has money from their family, from generations, or they own many things like houses and property, so they are wealthy because they cannot easily lose that money. So for example, Japan is a very wealthy country with a good standard of living.
Okay, so let's go back to our story and find out more about the Talbots. Major Talbot often spoke about the Southern society he had grown up in. So we know that there are a lot of states in the South, and they kind of have their own culture and they talk a lot about Southern manners and Southern society. So for Major Talbot to have to move from Alabama to Washington, he really missed that old culture that he had grown up in. He missed its customs and fashions and the system of slavery which the Civil War had ended.
Okay, so we have a word in here which is a system. A system is a set of things working together to achieve something. So it can be a physical thing, like, for example, the engine of a car. The many parts work together as a system to create the movement. It can also be something like how you receive your mail, the system of delivering mail. It goes from one place to another place, and eventually the mail carrier brings it to your door. So, for example, nobody told Lizzie about the new payment system.
Now, in the last sentence of our story, we learned about the word slavery. Slavery is a system where people of African descent were sold off to America and other countries as well. But in particular, in America, they were sold off to lots of farms and plantations where people were forced into manual labor and all of the time it was in very harsh conditions and they weren't paid money at all.
So this system of slavery was a very bad part of American history. And the American Civil War put an end to slavery in the United States. So we're going to learn a bit more about, the duplicity of Hargraves when we come back after the break.
Hello， 大家好，我是 Hanny。这一次要读的故事是 The Duplicity of Hargraves， 哈格雷夫斯的化身术。那标题里面用到 duplicity， 它表示欺骗、口是心非或者是搞两面手法，是一个名词。那么我们故事一开始写到塔尔伯特少校和他那个还没出嫁的女儿莉迪亚一起住在一个寄宿公寓里面。少校大部分的时间都在回忆他的过去，那他同时也在写一本关于他生平的书。这一家人是来自阿拉巴马州，曾经是个富裕的家庭，但是少校跟他女儿现在住在华盛顿特区，没剩多少钱了。那这个少校就常常谈起他成长的南方社会，他很怀念南方的习俗还有时尚，还有内战终结的奴隶制度。好单字 originally 这个副词它表示原先、起初或是原本。那么 wealthy 它是形容富有的、有钱的。 System 它表示系统或是体制，而我们文中的补充单字 slavery 则表示奴隶制度，它也可以指奴隶身份。这边2个重点，我们进入文法时间。我们来看第一个重点是 with 加受词加受词补语的句型呢，可以用来说明原因或是表达附带状况。受词补语可以用分词、形容词或是介系词片语。我们用分词来当受词补语的话，就来看这个受词跟受词补语的关系。主动就用现在分词 VING， 被动就用过去分词 PP。我们看2个例句。It's bad manners to talk with your mouth full. 满嘴食物还说话是不礼貌的。这时候我们用到受词补语是形容词 full。再看个例句是 He felt nervous with so many people watching him. 有这么多人看着他，他感到很紧张。那受词补语是用到现在分词 watching。再看到第2重点是形容词子句的限定与非限定用法。关系代名词啊，它具有代名词和连接词的功能，可以用来引导形容词子句修饰或补述说明前方的先行词。当这个先行词是人，而且在形容词子句里面当主格用，关系代名词就要用 who。那如果是做受格，则是用 whom。再来，当先行词是事物的话，关系代名词是用 which。那接着我们就来看看限定用法。它的使用时机呢，是当先行词是不特定的人事物，那么形容词子句呢，就是用来修饰限定前方的先行词。这时候啊，关系代名词前面不加逗号，而且呢是可以用 that 代替的。举例来说 ，The guy who is sitting next to Kevin， 或是 The guy that is sitting next to Kevin is an actor。坐在 Kevin 旁边的那个男生是个演员。The guy 是不特定对象，所以我们后面紧接着形容词子句 Who is sitting next to Kevin， 或是 That is sitting next to Kevin 来限定它的范围。这时候 Who 或是 That 前面不加逗号。我们再看到非限定用法，它的使用时机是先行词是专有名词独一无二的人事物，那形容词子句是用来补述说明先行词。这时候啊，关系代名词前面必须加上逗号哦，但是不可以用 that 代替。举例来说 ，Selena lives in Seoul, which is the capital of South Korea.Selena 住在首尔，那是南韩的首都。那么 Seoul 首尔是专有名词，我们接着用形容词子句 which is the capital of South Korea 来补充说明这个城市。那 which 前面要加逗号，也就是把补充部分把它隔开来嘛。这时候 which 不可以用 that 代替。那我们接着回到课文中。
Another boarder, Henry Hopkins Hargraves, took an interest in Major Talbot and spent most of his time listening to the old man's tales. Major Talbot also enjoyed reading to him from his book. One day, Miss Lydia asked her father for some money to pay the bills. Major Talbot reached into his pocket and discovered they only had $2 left. After unsuccessfully trying to get his book published, the Major spent his remaining money on 2 tickets to a new play, as he had heard it presented a sympathetic view of the South.
Welcome back. So before the break, we started our story and we learned that Major Talbot and his daughter are living in a boarding house in Washington, D.C. They originally lived in Alabama and were wealthy, but now they have very little money left. And Major Talbot misses his days of living in Alabama.
So let's find out what the Talbots do in this boarding house and if they meet other people. Let's get back to our story. Another boarder, Henry Hopkins Hargraves, took an interest in Major Talbot and spent most of his time listening to the old man's tales. Major Talbot also enjoyed reading to him from his book. So they kind of became friends, I guess. Hargraves, he liked listening to Major Talbot and the stories he shared of the South, right? Because we know that Major Talbot, he misses his old home in Alabama.
And Hargraves is another boarder. So a boarder is just a word meaning someone who lives in a boarding house is a boarder. So all of these characters, Major Talbot, his daughter, and Mr. Hargraves are all boarders.
So, for example, if you went to boarding school, you would be a boarder too. A student can also be a boarder. So, as long as you're living somewhere that is not your house and you're paying money to live somewhere, you can be a boarder.
Okay, continuing on. One day, Miss Lydia asked her father for some money to pay the bills. Major Talbot reached into his pocket and discovered they only had $2 left.
So they really didn't have a lot of money left at all. After unsuccessfully trying to get his book published, the Major spent his remaining money on 2 tickets to a new play, as he had heard it presented a sympathetic view of the South.
Okay.
That's interesting. So he'd been writing a book and he wanted to get it published. So when you get a book published, it's trying to print your book. You're trying to get somebody to buy your book and print it so more people can have access to your book. So he wasn't successful in that.
So he's trying to sell his book, trying to make money from his book. And because he was unable to get it published, he only has remaining $2. So remaining means left over or unused. So if you have something remaining, maybe I have some remaining food in my fridge from the dinner last night. It's the food that was not eaten, was not used by being eaten. So for example, the remaining people on the beach played in the sea. So from that you would understand that there were more people on the beach before, but some people have left. So it's the remaining people the people that are still there play in the sea.
So we know that Major Talbot spent the last of his money in a play that he's interested in. Why would you spend your money, okay? You don't have a lot left and then you want to spend it going to a play. It was because we know he missed his home, he missed Alabama, so he missed the South. And this play would talk about its sympathetic views about the South. So we'll find out more tomorrow when we read and continue our story.
故事写到另外一位技术房客哈格雷夫斯 Hargraves 对少校很感兴趣，那大部分的时间都在听这一位老先生的故事。少校也很喜欢朗读书上的内容给他听。那有一天呢，莉迪亚向父亲要一些钱来付账单。少校就掏了一下口袋，发现他们只剩下$2哎。那他本来尝试要让他那一本书出版，可是却没有成功。后来少校竟然把他剩下的钱拿去买了一出剧的2张门票，因为他听说那一出剧有呈现出同情南方的观点。好，我们看文中的 sympathetic。它就是形容表示同情的，或是引起共鸣的。那么单字 remaining， 它是形容剩余的、其余的。好，那么以上就是今天的讲解，同学别走开，马上回来哦。
Major Pendleton Talbot and his unmarried daughter, Miss Lydia Talbot, lived in a boarding house together. He spent most of his days thinking about the past while writing a book about his life. The Talbots were originally from Alabama. Though they had once been a wealthy family, the Major and Miss Lydia were now living in Washington, D.C., with little money left. Major Talbot often spoke about the Southern society he had grown up in. He missed its customs and fashions and the system of slavery which the Civil War had ended. Another boarder, Henry Hopkins Hargraves, took an interest in Major Talbot and spent most of his time listening to the old man's tales. Major Talbot also enjoyed reading to him from his book. One day, Miss Lydia asked her father for some money to pay the bills. Major Talbot reached into his pocket and discovered they only had $2 left. After unsuccessfully trying to get his book published, the Major spent his remaining money on 2 tickets to a new play, as he had heard it presented a sympathetic view of the South.
Does this look okay?
Hi, Shane.
These are okay, right? Hey, what's up? Why are you talking to the mirror? Wow, cool glasses.
Really? You don't think they look too nerdy?
No way. You look adorkable.
Adorkable? You mean adorable?
And dorky. Today, we're going to introduce a phrase called adorkable.
So let me guess. Is it a portmanteau, a word that blends two or more words together and combines their meanings?
That's right. Adorkable is made from adorable and dorky. It means someone or something is nerdy, but in a lovable way.
So then it is a compliment.
Definitely. For example, you wear those adorkable glasses.
That's so nice of you to say. I'll try to get used to my new glasses.
And that's all for today, guys.
See you next time.
Bye-bye.